Hi everyone, my name is Christina Kasperzak and I'm pleased to share the results of this year's national analysis of the 2016-2017 IDEA Part C and 619 child outcomes data. The national analysis was conducted by staff from the ECTA Center and the DaSy Center, and it was led by Cornelia Taylor. Our intended outcomes for this webinar are to support participants in learning about the latest national child outcomes data, including data patterns, and identifying where to find more information about the national analysis and resources to support your state and local data use. So let's get started with some very general background to set the stage. For many years, there was an important emphasis on getting children into Part C and 619 services. Access to services was critical, and there was a need to help families understand and access early intervention and preschool special education services. Along with access, there was a focus on compliance, making sure programs were meeting the federally mandated requirements. In the last 10 years or so, there's been a real shift from access and compliance to focusing on results. So that doesn't mean access and compliance are no longer important, but this is a new emphasis and is all about being accountable for outcomes of children and families served. Another contextual background is to just keep in mind that all federal agencies are required to report on their program outcomes. So for early intervention and preschool special education, OSEP uses the child outcomes data to justify the Part C and Part B preschool funding and to monitor state Part C results through the RDA process. In 2005, the Office of Special Education Programs first started requiring states to report on these three functional outcomes. So states report on the percentage of children who have positive social emotional skills, including social relationships, acquire and use knowledge and skills, including early language communication and early literacy for preschoolers, and the use of appropriate behavior to get their needs met. For each of those three functional outcome areas, states report on 5 progress categories, and those can be best understood as developmental trajectories. Along the bottom axis is a child's age in months. Along the side axis, a measure of the child's functioning or growth. So the trajectory tracks a child's growth over time. So you can see then category E is the group of children whose functioning was like the functioning of their same age peers. Their functioning in the outcome area follows the predicted trajectory for a child at their age. Then if you look at category D, that's the group of children whose functioning improved and reached the functioning comparable to their same age peers. So when they entered, they were below age expectations, and then when they, during the program, they reached age expectations in the outcome area by the time they were exiting. You can see on the trajectory slide that the orange dotted line labeled D is below that straight line labeled E, but then eventually increases and meets up with E. So then look at category C. This is the group of children whose functioning improves and moves closer to that of same age peers, but does not quite reach it. That's represented by the green dotted line that's labeled C, and you can see it's getting closer to the solid line E, but does not quite reach it. Category B is the group of children whose functioning improved, but there was not a change in their trajectory. So that's represented by the blue dotted line labeled B, and these children show improved functioning over time, but are not getting closer to the functioning that's expected for their age. Finally, take a look at category A. That's the group of children whose functioning did not improve. These children show no change in their functioning while they're in services. And we know that since children with disabilities ages 0 to 5 have a wide range of functioning, it's important to understand states will serve groups of children in all of these categories. Finally, the outcome data and the A to E progress categories are aggregated into two summary statements. So first, the first summary statement is of those children who entered or exited the program below age expectations in an outcome area, the percentage who substantially increased their rate of growth by the time they exited the program. So we're talking about the children who made greater than expected growth. That's the C plus the D category divided by the A plus B plus C plus D. The second summary statement is the percentage of children who were functioning within age expectations in an outcome area by the time they exit the program. So we're talking about children who exited at or above age expectations. And that's calculated by the D plus the E category over all the categories A plus B plus C plus D plus E. You might know already that there are some differences in how states measure outcomes. And there are three main approaches used by Part C in 619. And then a few states have designed their own, or what we call other in this categorical grouping of an other individual approach. The majority of states for Part C, 75%, and for 619, 69%, use the child outcome summary process. Some states use one tool statewide, and that is 14% for Part C and 17% for 619. And a few states are using publishers' online systems. 3 states in Part C and 2 states in 619. Over the years, a few states have changed approaches. We saw a slight change in this year's approaches where 2 states moved from using the child outcome summary process to using one tool statewide. There are lots of considerations involved in changing approaches, and it's important to keep in mind that no one approach is perfect. We welcome you to contact your TA staff at ECTA if you'd like any assistance with thinking through your approach or implications or ideas if you're considering changing approaches. So briefly, let's review the methodology for calculating our national estimates. We have been conducting the national analysis for more than 10 years now. And so we can see current data and trend data around the outcomes. The national estimates are computed using the average across states, and that's weighted by child count. We use 2 quality criteria to identify which states of the 50 states plus the District of Columbia meet the data quality standards. The first is data completeness. So data completeness is defined in Part C as a minimum of 28% of exiters included in the outcome data. For 619, completeness is defined as a minimum of 12% of the count of children ages 3 to 5 included in the outcomes data. You'll note that we eliminated states that were conducting sampling because we really have no metric for eliminating the extent of missing data. I'm sorry, for estimating the extent of missing data. The second data quality criterion was that states' data had reasonable patterns. And let me explain that a little bit. Because outliers in data patterns are often indicators of questionable data quality, we establish criteria for reasonable parameters of the A and the E progress category percentages. So for progress category A, which includes children with the most significant delays and degenerative conditions who do not make any progress at all, or actually their progress might regress from entry to exit, for that category, we established a cutoff of 10% of children in progress category A as a reasonable basis for and we also looked at historical data patterns. Progress category E includes children who enter and exit at age expectation in the outcome area. For this category, we looked at historical data patterns again, and we established a cutoff of 65% of children in category E as the reasonable limit. Okay, so here's a graph that shows the data. In this line graph, we're looking at the number of states that met criteria for inclusion in the national analysis for the last 10 years. The trend data show that over time, more and more states have met the minimum criteria for being included in these national estimates. We started, you can see back in 2008, only 19 Part C states and 15 619 states met the criteria. And now, when we look in 2016-17, we're close to all states. 43 of our 619 states and 46 Part C states met the criteria. These two tables show the reasons and numbers of states excluded from this year's national analysis. You can see the process includes excluding states if they are sampling, as I mentioned earlier, and also if a state is missing exiting or child count data, because without this data, we're not able to measure their completeness of data. So for Part C, we had 2 states excluded due to sampling, 1 state due to missing data, and 2 due to some data patterning issues. For 619, we had 3 states excluded because of sampling, 1 because of missing data, 2 because of patterning, and 2 because we had missing child count data. At a glance, these are our national child outcome data for 2016-2017 for both early intervention and preschool special education. So starting with Part C, we can see the first column is Summary Statement 1, which is children who made greater than expected growth. And that is 67% in social relationships, 73% in knowledge and skills, and 75% in action to meet needs. In each category, 2/3 or between 2/3 and 3/4 of children were making greater than expected growth or changing their growth trajectories. If we look at the Summary Statement 1 data for preschool 619, that's in column 3, we can see that 80% or more of children are making greater than expected growth in each of the 3 outcome areas. Okay, now looking at Summary Statement 2, for early intervention, we see that the national averages are between 49 and 57%. And for preschool, the national averages for exiting at age expectations are between 56 and 65%. Further interpretation of these data can be made in looking at trend data, as well as setting up various comparisons. Let's take a little look at the state-by-state comparison of completeness of data. So this bar chart is for Part C, and in the bar chart, each green bar represents a different state with the state reported % of children included in their outcomes data for the year. On the low end, we're looking at one state reporting down around 5%, and on the upper end, a state that is reporting around 100%. So you can see that the national average is 65%, and that has increased just slightly from last year. But there's just such a huge range of variation in states. States are using a variety of strategies to address issues of missing data. So we know that completeness of data is a critical part of having quality data for decision making, and states are using strategies to address their missing data issues. Similarly, here's a bar chart showing the completeness of data for preschool for the year. Again, the completeness data ranges dramatically across states. On the low end, we have a state with approximately 1%, and on the high end, a state as high as 68%. Remember that 619 completeness data are calculated based on child count, so that's very different from Part C's exiting data. It's only a proxy, but it's the best proxy we have at the national level. We know that a lower percentage of children in child count data can be expected to be included in the child outcomes data, because the outcomes data includes children who exited during the year and had at least 6 months of services. So clearly, completeness of the data is a data quality issue many states are working on. And for 619, similar to Part C, there are strategies to increase the quality and therefore the usefulness of their outcomes data. These two graphs are trend data for Part C child outcomes for the last 5 years. Notice that each line color is a different outcome area. The left chart is Part C Summary Statement 1, that's greater than expected growth. And the chart on the right is Summary Statement 2, the children who exit at age expectations. Across the 5 years of national averages, we can see the data have not changed a lot over time. There's some noticeable consistency in the national averages over time. While there are slight increases and decreases, we just don't see any dramatic changes from year to year. You might also notice the order has remained consistent over time. So the purple color line on the first chart shows the average percentages for Summary Statement 1 for social relationships, and it's been the lowest of all the 3 outcome areas every year. And Action to Meet Needs has been the highest of the 3, represented by the green, light green bar. These are the same 2 outcome trend charts, but for the preschool Section 619 data. So these national estimates have also been consistent over time. Slight changes from year to year, but no major dips or jumps in the numbers. The first chart shows Summary Statement 1 data, and all the average percentages are very close together. There's very little differences from year to year and also from outcome to outcome. In contrast, Chart 2, which is Summary Statement 2 data, you can see more obvious differences between the percentages for the 3 outcome areas. So percentages for knowledge and skills, the blue line, is down in the lower 50s, while percentages for social relationships, the purple line, is consistently in the high 50s. So notice differences in outcome areas for Summary Statement 2. I want to switch now to talking about state-level variation and patterns. This bar chart shows the national estimates in Part C. This is Summary Statement 2, children who exit within age expectations in Outcome 2, which is knowledge and skills. So each green bar chart, or each green bar in the chart, represents a state's percentages reported this year. Of the 51 states included here, we have state reported averages from 17 all the way up to 74. So big range or variation across states. This bar chart shows the preschool data for Summary Statement 2, children who exited within age expectations in Outcome 2, which is knowledge and skills. Of the 51 states included here, we have state reported averages from 8% all the way up to 78%. So these kinds of variations get us asking questions about why such variations exist across states. What reasons might be behind the differences? States are in a unique position to conduct extensive analyses to better understand their own outcomes data and think about how it relates to child and family characteristics, program activities, or other factors. At the national level, we have pretty limited ability to dig deeper into the data, but we have tried a few analyses. One analysis we conducted was looking at the data by percent served in a state. So if we start with a general assumption or a hypothesis that a state that serves a higher percentage of children will have a population of children with a wider range of functioning. Or in contrast, a state that serves a lower percentage of children will have a population of children with more severe disabilities. So if we want to test that hypothesis, we might run the analysis we have here, examining the percent of children who exited the program at age expectations by percent served. In all three outcome areas, we see that states with a higher percentage of children served show a higher percentage of children exiting at age expectations. But we ran the same analysis for the preschool 619 data, and we don't see the same patterns at all. States serving a higher percent of children in preschool did not report a higher percentage of children exiting at age expectations. So that kind of challenges the assumption we made. We have to dig deeper to understand why. Could it be related to other state characteristics or variables? Could there be data quality differences? Is there something innately different with 619 that would explain the challenge of this assumption that higher percentage of children served should be related to higher percentage of children exiting at age expectations? So that's just one example of some additional analyses we've tried to run at the national level. And you know, we hope that will inspire states to examine their own state data more closely to understand it and help you use it for making change in your services and outcomes for kids and families. Okay, a key resource available to state Part C and 619 coordinators is your state data quality profile for child outcomes data. The profiles were sent to all coordinators and includes the following contents. It includes comparisons of state data to national data, trend data for summary statements, as well as the A to E progress categories, and it includes analyses related to the two quality criteria, completeness and patterns. We would really like this data quality profile to be a useful tool to states, and we have staff who are available to look at your profile with you if you have questions about the content, or you might need some support with interpretation and use of the data. Here's a quick look at the types of charts and data in the profiles, comparisons of the state to national data, trends for summary statements over time, not just your state percentages, but also average and standard deviations. So you can look at your own state data and some of the patterns. Here's another example of data available in the profile. This one is the state completeness data. And again, it shows not only the state percentage, but the average and standard deviation. Please remember that these profiles are specifically shared with state Part C and 619 coordinators. So if you're a coordinator and you would like to request another copy, you can contact the ECTA Center. If you're not a coordinator and you're interested, you should contact your state Part C or 619 coordinator. Again, if coordinators who would like support reviewing, understanding, interpreting the data profiles can contact a TA person at ECTA for support. In closing, there are a few key resources to remind you about. The 4 resources highlighted here are: 1, our annual 2-pager with the highlights from this year's national analysis. 2, an online collection of child outcomes data reports that states have produced for local programs. 3 is a brief that addresses year-to-year changes in state child outcomes data to help stakeholder understanding of what it means and what it doesn't mean. And a link to a collection of national resources to support states using the COS process. So again, I want to prompt you to contact your TA providers at the ECTA Center and at DaSy for support as you're working on your child outcomes data collection, analysis, and use.